I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. What I'm about to tell you might save someone's life one day. I ran down that hospital hallway like my world was ending. My shoes echoed against the polished floor, creating that hollow sound that only exists in hospitals. That antiseptic smell burned my throat as I frantically searched for room 312. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my temples, in my neck, in every inch of my 66-year-old body that suddenly felt ancient and fragile. My hands trembled as I clutched my worn leather purse against my chest. Thomas, my son, my only son, emergency admission. Those words had come over the phone just 40 minutes ago from Emily, my daughter-in-law of 3 years. Her voice had been cold, distant. Thomas is in the hospital. Some kind of accident. Come if you want. Then she hung up, just like that. No details about what kind of accident. No information about how serious it was. No reassurance. Just those sharp words and that tone she always used with me, as if I were a nuisance, as if my existence were an inconvenience in her perfect life with my son. 308. 310. I was getting closer. My breath came in ragged gasps. Just a few more steps and I could see him. I could hold his hand and tell him everything would be okay. Because that's what mothers do, right? We fix what's broken. We heal what hurts. We give everything, absolutely everything, expecting nothing in return. And I had given so much to Thomas. So much that sometimes I wondered if there was anything left of Catherine Rogers underneath all those layers of sacrifice. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was reaching that room, seeing my son, finding out what had happened. I smoothed down my simple cotton blouse, the same one I'd worn to church last Sunday, and tried to control my breathing. I had to be strong for him. I had to be the mother I had always been. The mother who never fails. The mother who is always there, even when no one sees her, even when no one thanks her. That's when I felt it. A firm hand grabbed my arm and pulled me aside with surprising strength. I almost screamed in surprise, but another hand gently covered my mouth, while a female voice whispered urgently in my ear, "Hide and wait. Trust me." It was a nurse. I could tell from the blue scrubs I caught a glimpse of, from the smell of medicinal soap that emanated from her. She looked about 40, with serious dark eyes that shone with a strange intensity. "I'm Sarah Johnson," she whispered, showing me her hospital ID. "Please, Mrs. Rogers, your life and your son's may depend on what happens in the next few minutes." Before I could react, before I could ask what in the world was going on, she pushed me carefully but firmly toward the half-open door of room 311, right next to where Thomas was supposed to be. "Don't make a sound. Don't come out. Observe and listen. You'll understand everything later." And then she was gone, walking quickly down the hall, her shoes making that same rhythmic sound against the floor. I stood frozen behind that door, my heart now beating for completely different reasons. It was no longer just fear for my son. It was something else, something dark and heavy that I couldn't name yet, something that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. The room was empty and dark. It smelled of clean sheets and that artificial air conditioning that dries out your mouth. I leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. Why would a nurse hide me as if I were in danger? Me? Catherine Rogers, retired elementary school teacher? It was ridiculous. And yet, something in her eyes, something in the urgency of her voice made me stay put. "Trust me," she had said. And for some reason I can't explain, I did. Maybe because in that moment of absolute desperation, any outstretched hand seemed like a lifeline. Or maybe because after so many years of being invisible, of being the sweet old lady that no one really sees, Someone was finally seeing me, protecting me. Though I didn't know from what. My breathing slowly calmed as my eyes adjusted to the gloom. I could see the silhouette of the empty bed, the IV pole hanging like a metallic skeleton, the closed curtains that let in barely a thin line of light from the hallway. Less than a minute passed. 60 seconds that felt like an eternity. And then I heard them. Voices coming from the hallway. Emily's voice, unmistakable with that sugary tone she used when she wanted something, and another voice, masculine, unfamiliar, formal. They stopped right in front of room 312, right across from my hiding place. My entire body went rigid. I held my breath without realizing it. "Are you sure no one will see us here?" the man asked. Emily let out a brief, dry laugh like the rustling of dead leaves. "The old woman is on her way, but she'll still take a while. The guards don't let just anyone through that fast. We have plenty of time." Old woman. She called me an old woman. I felt something tighten in my chest, as if someone was squeezing my heart with their bare hands. But I forced myself to stay still, to keep listening, because something told me this was just the beginning. "Good," the man replied. "Then let's go over the documents one more time. The transfer of the house has to be ready before he wakes up. If he asks anything, you say he signed everything before the accident. Understood? The house, our house, the house I had bought with my dead husband Robert's life insurance money. The house I put in Thomas's name because I trusted him, because he was my son, because I never imagined something like this could happen. $180,000. All my security, all my future handed over on a silver platter because a mother trusts, because a mother gives without calculating." "Understood," Emily replied, and there was something in her voice that chilled my blood to the bone. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't worry for her husband hospitalized just feet away. It was satisfaction. It was victory. It was the sound of someone winning a game I didn't even know was being played. "And what about the business? The $200,000 in the joint account. I can transfer that too, right?" she continued. $200,000, the money I had loaned. No, that I had given to Thomas so he could set up his imports company. The money he never gave back because, Mom, it's an investment in our future. You'll see. You'll get it back when the business grows. I promise you. But the business had grown. The contracts had come in. The profits had started flowing. And I was still living in my small 2-room apartment, cooking with supermarket specials, wearing the same clothes from 5 years ago, turning off the lights to save on the electricity bill, while they lived in that huge house with a yard and a pool, while Emily bought designer handbags that cost more than my 3 months' rent, while Thomas changed cars every 2 years, like changing shoes. "Technically, it's complicated because you're not listed as the account holder," the man said. And then I recognized his profession. Lawyer. He was a damned lawyer. "But if we move quickly, we can transfer it before any next of kin is notified. You said his condition is critical?" Critical? My son's condition was critical? Emily hadn't mentioned that on the phone. My legs almost gave out beneath me. I had to lean against the wall to stay upright. "Dr. Wilson says he might not make it through the night," Emily replied, and the casualness in her voice made me want to scream. This was her husband they were talking about. My son. And she sounded like she was discussing the weather. "How much more of that stuff did you give him?" the lawyer asked, his voice dropping even lower. "Just what you told me," Emily said. 3 times the normal dose in his orange juice this morning. He didn't suspect a thing. He never does. Dose? Orange juice? What were they talking about? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. It couldn't be what it sounded like. It just couldn't. "And you're sure no one knows? No doctors are suspicious?" "Please, William," Emily scoffed. I've been doing this for months, gradually increasing the dose. Everyone thinks it's just some mysterious illness. Even Thomas believes it. I'm just tired, honey. Must be working too hard. Men are so easy to fool. The room started spinning around me. My son wasn't having an accident. He was being poisoned. By his wife. By the woman he loved. By the woman I had welcomed into my family with open arms. And once he's gone, everything transfers to you. The house, the business, the life insurance. That's another $500,000, right? William asked. $750,000, Emily corrected him, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I increased the policy last year, told him it was just good financial planning. $750,000. My son's life was worth $750,000 to her, plus the house, plus the business. Over $1 million in total. That's what my child's heartbeat was worth to this woman. You've thought of everything, William said, sounding almost impressed. But we need to be careful about the mother. If she starts asking questions... Catherine? Emily laughed, and it was like ice down my spine. She's nothing. A pathetic old woman living in a crappy apartment who thinks her son still loves her. She calls him every Sunday, and he puts her on speaker while rolling his eyes at me. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Thomas rolling his eyes. During our weekly calls. The calls I looked forward to all week. The calls where I carefully avoided asking for anything, being a burden, showing how lonely I really was. She has no power, no influence, and after Thomas is gone, I'll never have to see her wrinkled face again. Tears burned in my eyes, but I blinked them away. This wasn't the time for tears. This was the time for what? What could I, a 66-year-old retired teacher, do against this monster? Just to be safe, William continued, let's make sure she doesn't get too much time alone with any doctors. We don't want her asking the wrong questions. Fine, I'll keep an eye on her. But trust me, she's harmless. Now, let's finalize these papers. I want everything ready to go the minute his heart stops beating. They moved away then, their voices fading down the hallway. I stood in that dark room, shaking uncontrollably, my mind unable to process what I'd just heard. My son was dying. He was being murdered. By his wife. For money. And I had no proof. No evidence. Just what I'd overheard. Who would believe me? The pathetic old woman with the wrinkled face? I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in shock, before the door opened again and Sarah slipped back in. One look at my face and she knew I'd heard everything. Mrs. Rogers, she said softly, leading me to the chair in the corner. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way, but I needed you to hear it for yourself, to understand what we're dealing with. My son, I whispered, my voice breaking. She's killing my son. Yes, Sarah confirmed, her eyes full of compassion. But we're going to stop her. That's why I brought you here. That's why I've been watching her. Watching her? I don't understand. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, facing me. 3 weeks ago, I noticed something strange. Emily brings Thomas orange juice every morning, but she's very particular about it. Won't let anyone else touch it, prepares it herself in the visitor's kitchenette, disposes of the container herself. She leaned forward, her voice intense. I've been a nurse for 15 years, Mrs. Rogers. I've seen a lot of devoted spouses. But something about her behavior, it wasn't right. It wasn't love. It was performance. I nodded slowly, thinking about how Emily acted around others versus how she spoke to me when no one was listening. The sweet, caring wife in public, the cold, calculating woman in private. Then I noticed Thomas's symptoms, Sarah continued. The unexplained bruising, the nosebleeds, the confusion, the progressive liver damage, all consistent with warfarin overdose. Warfarin? I asked. It's a blood thinner, normally used to prevent blood clots, but in high doses. She trailed off, her meaning clear. It causes internal bleeding, I finished for her, remembering a neighbor who'd been on blood thinners after a heart attack. Exactly. Slow, progressive, hard to detect if no one is looking for it. And Emily has been increasing the dose over months, making it look like a natural progression of some mysterious illness. I felt sick to my stomach. But why? Why would you suspect this? People get sick all the time. Sarah's eyes darkened. Because I've seen it before. 2 years ago, at St. Luke's Hospital where I worked before transferring here. A patient named Daniel Peterson. Same symptoms. Same devoted wife bringing special orange juice. Same mysterious decline. She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo. A handsome man in his 40s, smiling at the camera. Next to him, a woman with dyed blonde hair. That's not Emily, I said, confused. No, Sarah agreed. That's Vanessa Taylor, Daniel's wife, who disappeared right after his death along with all his money and property. But look at the eyes, Mrs. Rogers. Look at the smile. I peered closer at the photo, and a chill ran through me. The hair was different. The name was different. But those cold green eyes, that calculated smile that never quite reached the eyes, I would recognize them anywhere. Emily, I whispered. Vanessa Taylor, Rebecca Johnson, Emily Rogers. Different names, same person, Sarah confirmed grimly. I recognized her the minute she walked in with Thomas 2 weeks ago. I couldn't believe it at first, but then I saw the pattern starting again. The orange juice, the symptoms. Why didn't you call the police? I demanded, anger surging through my shock. With what evidence? Sarah countered. A hunch? A resemblance? I needed proof. I needed to catch her in the act. So I've been watching, documenting, waiting for the right moment. She ran a hand through her short brown hair, frustration evident in her gesture. I tried to alert Dr. Wilson, he's Thomas's doctor, about my suspicions. He ordered additional tests, but without concrete evidence of tampering, there's only so much we can do. And now? I asked, my voice small. Sarah's expression hardened. Now we have you. Now we have proof of intent. Now we can save your son. For the first time since hearing that terrible conversation, I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by doubt. Who's going to believe me? I'm just an old woman. You heard what she called me. I believe you, Sarah said firmly. Dr. Wilson will believe you, and Detective Alicia Bennett will believe you. Detective? Sarah nodded. An old friend from college, works in fraud and elder abuse cases. I called her after I recognized Emily, or Vanessa, whatever her real name is. She's been quietly looking into backgrounds, previous cases. She checked her watch. She should be here in an hour. In the meantime, we need to get you in to see Thomas, and we need to get a sample of that orange juice. As if summoned by our conversation, the door opened again, and a tall man in a white coat entered. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and salt and pepper hair. Dr. Wilson, Sarah greeted him with obvious relief. This is Catherine Rogers, Thomas's mother. The doctor shook my hand, his expression grave. Mrs. Rogers, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Sarah has shared her concerns with me. Based on your son's symptoms and the new blood work, I'm inclined to agree with her assessment. Can you save him? I asked, cutting straight to what mattered most. Dr. Wilson's face softened. If we're right about warfarin poisoning, then yes. We can administer vitamin K and fresh frozen plasma to counteract the effects. The liver damage is concerning but should be reversible if we act quickly. He gestured for me to follow him. Come, let's go see your son. Emily stepped out to make some calls, which gives us a brief window. As we walked toward room 312, Dr. Wilson continued in a low voice. We've removed the orange juice container from his bedside and sent it for testing. We've also adjusted his medication to begin counteracting the warfarin, but subtly, so Emily won't notice the change in his condition too quickly. We stopped outside Thomas's door. Dr. Wilson put a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Rogers, I must warn you, your son is very ill. He's conscious but weak and confused. Don't let on what we suspect. If Emily realizes we're on to her, she might try something more drastic, I finished, understanding completely. I won't say anything. I just want to see my boy. Dr. Wilson nodded and opened the door. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. My strong, vibrant son, the boy who had climbed every tree in our neighborhood, the teenager who had played football and broken his arm twice, the man who had built a successful business from nothing, looked like a ghost in that hospital bed. Thomas's skin was pale yellow, with dark purple bruises visible on his arms. His once thick brown hair was limp and dull. His eyes, my husband's eyes, were sunken and confused. "Mom?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You came." I rushed to his bedside, taking his hand gently, mindful of the IV line. "Of course I came, sweetheart. I'll always come when you need me." Emily said, "Might be too much for you." Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort. Too much for me? I'd carried this boy for 9 months, had endured 16 hours of labor, had nursed him through chicken pox and heartbreaks and college applications. I'd worked 2 jobs after his father died to put him through business school, and she'd told him it might be too much for me to visit my dying son? I swallowed my rage, forced a smile. "Nothing is too much when it comes to you, Thomas. How are you feeling?" He tried to shrug, then winced. "Tired. So tired. They don't know what's wrong. Tests and more tests." I stroked his hair back from his forehead, just like I used to do when he had a fever as a little boy. "The doctors are working hard to figure it out. Dr. Wilson seems very thorough." Thomas's eyes drifted closed, then snapped open again, as if he was fighting to stay awake. "Emily's been amazing. Makes me special juice every morning. Says it's packed with vitamins." Special juice. The orange juice laced with enough warfarin to stop his heart. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste blood, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "That's wonderful," I managed to say. "She's taking good care of you." "Better than I deserve," he murmured, and my heart broke all over again. "Been a terrible husband, working too much, and a terrible son, too." "No," I protested, genuine this time. "You could never be a terrible son." His eyes filled with tears. "Haven't been there for you since Dad died. Then after marrying Emily, even less. She says, I need to cut the apron strings. Be a man." Cut the apron strings. Be a man. I'd bet anything those were Emily's exact words, planted in my son's mind to isolate him from me. The classic playbook of an abuser: separate the victim from their support system. "You've been building your life, your business," I said softly. "That's exactly what you should be doing. I'm so proud of you, Thomas." He squeezed my hand weakly. "The business is doing well. Finally. Was going to surprise you. Pay you back everything. Buy you a proper house." Now it was my turn to fight back tears. All this time I'd thought he'd forgotten the money I'd given him, but he'd been planning to pay me back, to take care of me, the way I'd always taken care of him. "Don't worry about any of that now," I said. "Just focus on getting better." His eyes drifted closed again. So tired, Mom. Something's wrong with me. Can feel it. Emily says, just stress. Doctor says, might be autoimmune, but feels like I'm disappearing, piece by piece. Because you are, my sweet boy. Because she's killing you slowly, watching you fade away, counting the days until she can cash in your life insurance policy. Dr. Wilson stepped forward. Mr. Rogers needs to rest now, Mrs. Rogers. You can come back later. I nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Emily might return any minute. I leaned down and kissed Thomas's forehead. I'll be close by, I promise. As we stepped back into the hallway, I saw a flash of familiar blonde hair at the end of the corridor. Emily was returning. Dr. Wilson quickly ushered me into a consultation room where Sarah was waiting. We need to move fast, Dr. Wilson said, closing the door. Based on Thomas's blood work and symptoms, I'm confident we're dealing with warfare and poisoning. The lab is testing the orange juice sample now. But we can't wait for those results, Sarah added. His liver function is declining rapidly. If she gives him another dose tomorrow morning, it could kill him, Dr. Wilson finished grimly. I sank into a chair, my legs no longer able to support me. What do we do? If we confront her without proof, she'll deny everything. If we call the police, we may not have enough evidence for an arrest, a new voice said. I turned to see a woman in her late 40s entering the room. She had sharp eyes and carried herself with quiet authority. Mrs. Rogers, I'm Detective Alicia Bennett. Sarah called me about your situation. Detective Bennett sat across from me, her expression serious, but kind. I've been investigating cases like your daughter-in-law's for 15 years. Women, and sometimes men, who marry for money, then dispose of their spouses through accidents or mysterious illnesses. Serial killers, I whispered. Serial predators, Bennett corrected. Money is the primary motivation, not the killing itself, though some develop a taste for it over time. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a series of photos. Different women, different hairstyles and colors, but the same cold green eyes in every picture. Next to each photo was a driver's license or ID card. Vanessa Mitchell, original name, Rebecca Johnson, first marriage, 2015-2017. Husband died of food poisoning. Melissa Thompson, second marriage, 2018 to 2020. Husband died of accidental medication overdose. Diane Peterson, third marriage, 2020-2022. Husband died of unexplained bleeding disorder. And now Emily Rogers, married to your son for 3 years. My head spun with this information. 4 men, 4 deaths, 4 fortunes stolen. And my Thomas was meant to be number 5. We've been building a case, Bennett continued, but it's been challenging. She's careful, leaves little evidence, changes identities completely between marriages, moves to different states. But you have all this information, I protested. How can that not be enough? Circumstantial, Bennett sighed. We can prove the identity changes, but proving murder is harder, especially years after the fact. Bodies have been cremated, evidence gone. We need to catch her in the act. By using my son as bait? I asked incredulously. Dr. Wilson shook his head. No, we're going to save Thomas. But we also need to gather enough evidence to put Emily, or Vanessa, away for good. So she can't do this to anyone else, Sarah added softly. Detective Bennett leaned forward. Mrs. Rogers, we need your help. We need to set a trap. And to do that, we need to let Emily believe her plan is working. What do you mean? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. We need to let her believe Thomas is getting worse, not better. We need her to think she's winning, while we document everything she does. I stared at these 3 people, A nurse who had followed her instincts, a doctor determined to save his patient, a detective who had hunted this predator for years. And I realized that fate had brought us together for a reason. For the first time since receiving that terrible phone call, I felt something shift inside me. The fear and shock didn't disappear, but alongside them grew something new, something hard and bright and determined. "Tell me what you need me to do," I said, straightening my shoulders. Before Detective Bennett could answer, the door burst open. Emily stood there, her perfect blonde hair slightly disheveled, her green eyes narrowing as they took in the scene before her. "Catherine," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Thomas is asking for you." Our eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between us. She didn't know what I'd overheard, but she sensed something had changed. A predator's instinct warning her of danger. "Dr. Wilson was just explaining Thomas's condition to me," I said, rising to my feet. I was surprised at how steady my voice sounded. Emily's gaze flicked to Detective Bennett. "And who is this?" "Dr. Bennett," Sarah jumped in smoothly. "Specialist in liver disorders. Just consulting on Thomas's case." Emily's perfect mask slipped back into place. "How wonderful! More help for my darling husband. He means the world to me, you know. I don't know what I'd do if anything happened to him." The audacity of her lie, spoken so convincingly while standing in a room with people who knew the truth, made my blood boil. But I kept my expression neutral, even managed a small smile. "We all want what's best for Thomas," I said. Emily linked her arm through mine, a gesture that would have seemed affectionate to anyone watching, but I could feel the warning in her grip. "Let me take you back to his room. He was so worried when he woke up and couldn't find you." As she led me out, I glanced back at the others. Detective Bennett gave me the slightest nod. The message was clear. Play along. Don't show your hand. The game has just begun. Walking down that hallway with my son's would-be murderer, I made a silent vow. This woman had underestimated me, had dismissed me as just an old lady, a nuisance, a wrinkled face she'd never have to see again. But she had no idea who she was really dealing with. She had no idea of the strength that lives in a mother's heart. I, Catherine Rogers, retired teacher, widow, 66 years old. I was going to save my son, and I was going to make sure Emily Rogers, Vanessa Mitchell, whatever her real name was, would never hurt another family again. The hunt had begun, and this time, the predator was about to become the prey. The next few hours passed in a blur of fear and planning. I sat by Thomas's bedside, holding his hand while Emily hovered nearby, playing the part of the devoted wife perfectly, too perfectly. Every concerned frown, every gentle touch to his forehead, every whispered, "I love you," was a performance. A grotesque charade that made my skin crawl, but I smiled weakly and played my assigned role, the worried but clueless mother. "You should go home and rest, Catherine," Emily suggested, her voice honey-sweet. "You look exhausted. I'll call if anything changes." What she really meant was, "Leave so I can continue poisoning your son without your interference." "I'd rather stay," I replied, matching her fake smile with one of my own. "I can sleep in the chair. A mother's place is with her child when he's sick." Something flashed in her eyes. Annoyance, maybe even hatred, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Suit yourself," she said with a shrug. "I need to run home and grab some things for Thomas anyway. His favorite pajamas, his tablet. I'll be back in an hour." As soon as she left, Dr. Wilson and Sarah slipped into the room. Detective Bennett joined us moments later. "We don't have much time," Bennett said, her voice low and urgent. The lab confirmed our suspicions. The orange juice contained a massive dose of warfarin, more than enough to cause fatal bleeding if it continued. My stomach lurched. Hearing it confirmed made the nightmare even more real. "What about Thomas?" I asked, looking at my son's sleeping form. "How do we protect him?" "We've already started counteracting the warfarin with vitamin K therapy," Dr. Wilson explained. "But we need to be careful. If his condition improves too rapidly, Emily will know something's wrong." "So we let her think she's still winning," Bennett added, "while gathering the evidence we need to put her away for good." Sarah nodded. "We'll monitor Thomas constantly, adjust his medication when Emily's not around. He'll appear to be getting worse while actually getting better." "But she'll still be giving him that poison," I protested, my voice breaking. Dr. Wilson shook his head. "Not if we can help it. We're switching his food and drink to a secure protocol, hospital staff only. If she brings anything, we have a plan to intercept and replace it." "And we need to plant surveillance," Bennett added, pulling small devices from her pocket. "Audio and video. We need to catch her in the act or talking about her intentions." As they set up the tiny cameras, one disguised as a clock, another hidden in the TV remote, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, clear determination. "What's my role in all this?" I asked. Detective Bennett regarded me thoughtfully. "You're our secret weapon, Mrs. Rogers. Emily has completely underestimated you. She sees you as harmless, maybe even senile. We can use that." "I need you to keep playing that role," she continued. "The worried but oblivious mother. Let her think you're clueless. Maybe even drop some information that might tempt her to reveal more. Mention Thomas's life insurance, the house, anything related to his assets." I nodded slowly. "I can do that." "There's one more thing," Sarah said hesitantly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small recording device. "Wear this at all times. It might capture something the fixed cameras miss." As I slipped the small device into my blouse pocket, Thomas stirred. His eyes fluttered open, confusion evident in his gaze. "Mom? Still here?" he mumbled. I took his hand, fighting back tears. "Still here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." He frowned slightly. "Where's Emily?" "She went home to get some things for you. She'll be back soon." Thomas nodded, then winced as the movement caused him pain. "Something's wrong with me, Mom. Really wrong. Doctors won't tell me how bad it is." I exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Wilson, who gave a subtle shake of his head. Thomas couldn't know the truth yet. It might put him in even more danger. "They're running tests," I said soothingly. "The best doctors are working on it. Dr. Wilson is excellent." Thomas's eyes drifted to the doctor standing nearby. "Tell me straight, Doc. Am I dying?" Dr. Wilson approached the bed, his manner professional but kind. "Your condition is serious, Mr. Rogers, but we're doing everything we can to identify the cause and treat it effectively." Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. Thomas seemed to accept this, his eyes already drooping with exhaustion. "Just want to know if I should get my affairs in order." My heart clenched at these words. My son was contemplating his own mortality while his wife was actively trying to hasten his death. "Focus on rest and healing," Dr. Wilson advised. "We'll talk more when you're stronger." As Thomas drifted back to sleep, Bennett motioned us into the hallway. "Emily will be back soon," she warned. "Mrs. Rogers, I'd like you to coincidentally discover something when she returns." From her bag, she pulled out what looked like an expensive designer purse, cream-colored leather with gold hardware. I recognized it immediately as Emily's favorite. "This was in her car," Bennett explained. "We had probable cause to search it based on the poisoned orange juice. Inside is a treasure trove of evidence. Fake IDs, contact information for previous victims, even receipts for warfarin purchases. You want me to find it? I asked, understanding dawning. Bennett nodded. We need to rattle her. Make her wonder how much you know. It might push her to make a mistake. Isn't that dangerous? Dr. Wilson asked, concern evident in his voice. We'll have officers nearby, Bennett assured him. Mrs. Rogers will never be alone with Emily. But yes, there's an element of risk. Are you comfortable with this, Mrs. Rogers? Was I comfortable with it? No, but was I willing to do it to save my son and stop this monster? Absolutely. Just tell me where and when, I replied. The plan was simple. When Emily returned, I would accidentally knock over her purse. The contents would spill out, including a small zipper pouch containing one of her fake IDs. My reaction would tell her I'd seen something I shouldn't have. While we waited, Sarah checked Thomas's vitals again. Blood pressure is stabilizing, she murmured. The vitamin K is working, but his liver function is still concerning. How long until he's out of danger? I asked. Dr. Wilson sighed. Hard to say. The warfarin needs to clear his system, and then we need to assess the organ damage. Days, maybe a week for the immediate danger. Longer for full recovery. A week. We needed to keep up this charade for a week while gathering enough evidence to put Emily away. It seemed like an eternity. The sound of heels clicking on linoleum alerted us to Emily's return. Bennett and Wilson disappeared into an adjacent room, while Sarah pretended to be checking Thomas's IV. Emily breezed in, carrying a small overnight bag and her designer purse. How is he? She asked, her voice pitched perfectly to convey concern. The same, I replied, watching as she set her purse down on the small table by the window. She approached Thomas, leaning down to kiss his forehead in a show of affection that turned my stomach. Poor darling. So tired all the time. The doctors are baffled, aren't they? Of course they were baffled. When someone is being poisoned, conventional illnesses don't fit the symptoms. Dr. Wilson seems very thorough, I said carefully. He mentioned something about additional blood tests. A flicker of something, concern, alarm, crossed Emily's perfect features. More tests? Did he say what kind? Something about clotting factors, I think, I replied, watching her closely. I didn't quite understand the medical terms. Emily's fingers tightened slightly on the bed rail. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Just standard procedure. Now was my moment. I stood and moved toward the door. I should get some coffee. Would you like some? No, thank you, she replied, already turning back to Thomas. As I passed the table, I deliberately caught my hip on the corner, jostling it hard enough to send her purse tumbling to the floor. Its contents scattered across the linoleum. Makeup, phone, keys, wallet, and a small leather pouch that fell open, spilling several cards onto the floor. Oh, I'm so sorry, I exclaimed, bending down to help gather the items. That's when I saw it. A driver's license with Emily's photo, but a different name. Vanessa Mitchell. I made sure to stare at it just long enough for Emily to notice. Her reaction was instantaneous. She lunged forward, snatching the ID and other items from my hands. I've got it, she snapped, all pretense of warmth gone from her voice. I straightened up slowly, my heart pounding. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's fine. She cut me off, stuffing everything back into her purse with trembling hands. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the masks we both wore slipped. I saw the calculating predator beneath her perfect exterior, and I let her see just a glimpse of the fierce, protective mother beneath my harmless old lady facade. That's an unusual name on that card, I said quietly. Not yours, surely. Her laugh was brittle. Oh, that old thing. Just a prop from a theater production years ago. I used to do some acting in college. How interesting, I replied, not believing a word. You must have been very convincing on stage. I was, she said, her green eyes cold as ice. I've always been good at becoming whoever I need to be. The threat in her words was unmistakable, but instead of frightening me, it only strengthened my resolve. I'll get that coffee now, I said, turning toward the door. I think we could both use some caffeine. It might be a long night. As I left the room, I could feel her eyes boring into my back. The game had changed. She knew I suspected something. The question was, what would she do about it? In the hallway, Bennett fell into step beside me. Good work, she murmured. She's rattled. Now let's see how she reacts. We didn't have to wait long. The hidden cameras in Thomas's room captured everything. Emily pacing, making frantic phone calls, checking the hallway repeatedly to ensure no one was listening. She saw the ID, William, she hissed into her phone. The mother. She knows something's not right. She listened for a moment, then continued. No, I can't just leave. Everything's not in place yet. The transfers haven't gone through. Another pause. Well, speed it up then, and find out if she's talked to anyone. Check if there are any police reports, any investigations. Emily ran a hand through her perfect blonde hair, messing it slightly, the first crack in her immaculate appearance. I need to accelerate the timeline. He's taking too long to die with the current dosage. The coldness in her voice as she discussed my son's death made me physically ill. But I forced myself to keep listening as Bennett played the recording for me in a small conference room down the hall. I can get more warfarin, Emily continued, but I need to be careful. That nurse, the one with the short brown hair, she watches me like a hawk. Sarah's vigilance had not gone unnoticed. I made a mental note to warn her to be extra careful. Just get the paperwork done, Emily snapped before ending the call. Detective Bennett switched off the recording. This is good. She's implicated herself and the lawyer, but we need more. Specifics about her plans, maybe her admitting to previous murders. She's going to try to kill him faster now, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. Bennett nodded grimly. Yes, which means we need to be one step ahead at all times. Dr. Wilson joined us, his expression grave. We've placed a security detail, disguised as regular hospital staff, on this floor. Thomas will never be left alone with her. What about at night? I asked. She'll insist on staying. You'll stay too, Bennett decided. We'll set up a cot for you. Sarah will be on night duty. Between the three of you, someone will always be awake and watching. I nodded, then voiced the fear that had been gnawing at me. What if she gets desperate? What if she tries something more direct than poison? Bennett's expression was grim. That's why we have officers stationed nearby. But you're right to be concerned. As we close in, she'll become more dangerous, not less. The next 48 hours were the most tense of my life. We maintained our charade. Emily playing the devoted wife, me the worried but increasingly suspicious mother. Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness, his body fighting both the poison and the aggressive treatment. True to our predictions, Emily tried several times to bring Thomas special food and drinks. Each time, Sarah or another nurse would intervene, citing hospital policy about outside food for patients with liver issues. Emily's frustration grew visibly with each thwarted attempt. The cameras captured her making more calls to William, demanding updates on the financial transfers, complaining about the hospital staff's interference. On the morning of the third day, I was dozing in the chair beside Thomas's bed when I heard him whisper, "Mom?" I opened my eyes to find him looking at me with more clarity than he'd shown in days. The treatments were working. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, taking his hand. He glanced around the room, confirming we were alone. "Something's wrong with Emily," he murmured. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Thomas's eyes, so like his father's, were troubled. Found something in her drawer last month. Different IDs, different names. When I asked her about it, she said they were props from an acting job. The same lie she told me. Did you believe her? I asked carefully. He hesitated. Wanted to, but then noticed money missing from our accounts. Large transfers I never authorized. So Thomas had already been suspicious before he got sick. This changed things. Have you talked to her about the money? I asked. He shook his head weakly. Was going to, then got sick. So tired all the time. Can't think straight. I squeezed his hand gently. Thomas, when did you start feeling ill? Do you remember? His brow furrowed in concentration. Few months ago, just tired at first, then bruising, nosebleeds. Emily said stress, work too hard. Classic gaslighting, making him think his symptoms were his own fault. She brings me juice every morning, he continued, his voice growing weaker. Says it has special vitamins. Always watches me drink it. Every drop. My son wasn't as oblivious as Emily had thought. He'd noticed things, had suspicions, but the poison had clouded his mind, made it difficult for him to put the pieces together. Thomas, I said gently, I need you to trust me. The doctors are helping you get better, but it's important that Emily doesn't know you're improving. Can you do that? Can you keep pretending to be very sick when she's around? Confusion flashed across his face. Why? How much should I tell him? If he knew the full truth, would his reaction give us away? But he deserved to know something. Emily isn't who she claims to be, I said carefully. And I don't think she has your best interests at heart. The police are investigating her, but they need time. Understanding dawned slowly in his eyes. She's been stealing from me. Maybe worse? I nodded, unable to say the words. She's been poisoning you. Thomas closed his eyes. Pain etched on his face. Emotional pain this time, not physical. Trusted her. Loved her. I know, I whispered, stroking his hair. I'm so sorry. When he opened his eyes again, there was a new resolve in them. What do you need me to do? Just keep pretending to be very ill when she's here. Let the doctors and nurses handle everything else. He gave a slight nod. I can do that. Always was. Good at poker. Despite everything, I smiled. My son's spirit was still there, still fighting. The sound of the door opening made us both look up. Emily entered, carrying a large bouquet of flowers. Her hair and makeup were perfect as always, her designer dress unwrinkled despite having spent the night at the hospital. Good morning, darling, she cooed, approaching the bed. Look what I brought you. Your favorite lilies. Thomas immediately slumped back against the pillows, his expression becoming vacant and weak again. If I hadn't just been speaking with him, I would have believed the act myself. Morning, he mumbled, his voice deliberately faint. Emily set the flowers down and placed a cool hand on his forehead in a show of concern. Still feverish. Have the doctors said anything new? More tests, I replied, falling back into my role. They mentioned his liver function is declining. This was actually the opposite of the truth. His liver function was slowly improving, but Emily didn't need to know that. A smile flickered briefly across her face before she controlled it. Poor baby. You just can't catch a break, can you? She reached into her bag and pulled out a small thermos. I brought your special juice. Made it fresh this morning. Thomas's eyes met mine briefly, a silent communication passing between us. He knew now that the special juice was what had been making him sick. Before either of us could react, Sarah entered the room, clipboard in hand. Good morning. Time for vitals and medication. She spotted the thermos and frowned. I'm sorry, Mrs. Rogers, but Mr. Rogers is on a restricted diet now. No outside food or beverages. Doctor's orders. Emily's knuckles whitened as she gripped the thermos. "This is just fresh juice. It's full of nutrients he needs." "I understand," Sarah said, her tone professional but firm. "But with his liver function so compromised, we need to carefully monitor everything he consumes. Hospital policy." For a moment, I thought Emily might argue further, but she simply forced a smile. "Of course. Whatever's best for Thomas." As she set the thermos aside, Sarah smoothly picked it up. "I'll just dispose of this for you." What Emily didn't know was that Sarah would be taking it straight to the lab for testing, adding to our growing pile of evidence. The day continued in this strange, tense dance. Emily growing increasingly frustrated as her attempts to harm Thomas were blocked at every turn, Thomas playing the role of deteriorating patient whenever she was present. The medical team subtly improving his condition when she wasn't looking. By evening, Detective Bennett had more news for me. We met in the same small conference room, away from Emily's watchful eyes. "We've made progress," she said, her voice tired but satisfied. "The lawyer, William Hayes, has been under surveillance. He's been making arrangements to transfer the house into Emily's name, backdating documents to make it look like Thomas signed them before entering the hospital." "Can you arrest him?" I asked. "Not yet. We want to catch them both in the act of conspiracy, but we've frozen the accounts they're trying to access, using a judge's order. They just don't know it yet." She slid a folder across the table to me. "There's more. We've confirmed Emily's true identity, Vanessa Mitchell, born in Chicago, 1988, raised in foster care after her mother was imprisoned for drug offenses. History of petty theft and fraud in her teens." I opened the folder, staring at the mugshot of a much younger version of the woman who had married my son. Even then, her eyes had that cold, calculating look. "What about the previous husbands?" I asked. Bennett's expression darkened. "Daniel Peterson, died 2022, unexplained bleeding disorder. James Collins, died 2020. Accidental overdose. Robert Winters died 2018, food poisoning. All deaths initially ruled as natural or accidental. All men were wealthy. All had recently changed their wills to benefit their new wife. 3 men dead, 3 families devastated. And my Thomas would have been number 4 if not for Sarah's vigilance. "How did she get away with it for so long?" I asked, anger building inside me. "She's smart, changes her appearance, her name, her backstory, moves to different states, never stays in one place long enough for people to connect the dots." Bennett sighed. "And she picks her victims carefully, usually men who are somewhat isolated, often with strained family relationships. Like Thomas had become after marrying her. She had methodically cut him off from me, from his old friends, from anyone who might notice the changes in him. She's also careful about the method," Bennett continued. "Warfarin poisoning can mimic natural diseases if no one is specifically looking for it. By the time suspicions might arise, the body is cremated and she's gone with the money." A chill ran through me at how calculated it all was. How many times she had done this before. How close she had come to succeeding with my son. "There's one more thing," Bennett said, her tone changing. "We've been monitoring her calls. She's getting desperate. This afternoon, after another failed attempt to bring Thomas special food, she made a call to a new number. She played the recording and Emily's voice filled the room. The hospital staff is interfering. I can't get near him with the special juice anymore. I need something faster, something they won't detect." "Yes, that would work. Tonight, when the old lady is asleep. No, I don't think that nurse will be there overnight. 2 hours? I'll meet you at the usual place." My blood ran cold. "She's planning something for tonight. Something more direct." Bennett nodded grimly. "We think she's arranging for a different poison. Something that could be injected into his IV, perhaps. Something that would look like cardiac arrest. "We can't let her near him," I exclaimed, panic rising in my throat. "We won't," Bennett assured me. "We're setting a trap. Sarah will pretend to go off duty, but she'll actually be monitoring from the nurse's station via camera. You'll pretend to fall asleep in your chair. Officers will be stationed nearby, ready to move the instant she tries anything." "Using my son as bait," I said bitterly. "Using our secure monitoring to finally catch her in the act," Bennett corrected me. "Thomas will be in no real danger. We'll have the room fully monitored and medical personnel will be seconds away." I closed my eyes, wrestling with the fear and anger churning inside me. "And if something goes wrong?" Bennett's voice softened slightly. "Mrs. Rogers, I know this is terrifying, but this may be our only chance to get concrete evidence that will put her away for good. Otherwise, even if we stop her now, she might eventually walk free to target someone else's son." The thought of Emily walking free, finding another victim, destroying another family, was unbearable. I opened my eyes and straightened my shoulders. "What do I need to do?" I asked. The plan was set. I would return to Thomas's room and play my part. When night fell, I would pretend to drift off to sleep in my chair. Sarah would ostentatiously announce the end of her shift, introducing her replacement, actually an undercover officer. Then we would wait. As I prepared to return to Thomas's room, Dr. Wilson pulled me aside. "Mrs. Rogers, there's something else you should know. The lab results from this morning's orange juice sample showed an enormous increase in the warfarin concentration, nearly triple what was in previous samples." "She's escalating," I whispered. "Yes, if Thomas had consumed it, it could have caused catastrophic bleeding within hours. She's getting desperate, which makes her more dangerous." With this grim warning, I returned to my son's room. Emily was sitting by his bedside, scrolling through her phone, the picture of a bored but dutiful wife. Thomas was asleep, or pretending to be, his chest rising and falling steadily. "Any change?" I asked, settling into my chair on the opposite side of the bed. "The same," Emily replied without looking up. "The doctors have no idea what they're doing. If he doesn't improve soon, I'm thinking of transferring him to a different hospital." Translation: if he doesn't die soon, I need to get him away from these vigilant medical staff. "Dr. Wilson seems very knowledgeable," I said mildly. "And Sarah is an excellent nurse." Emily's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sarah is nosy, always hovering, always watching, as if I don't know how to take care of my own husband. If only she knew how much Sarah had seen. How her vigilance had saved Thomas's life." "She's just doing her job," I said, then deliberately changed the subject. "I was wondering, Emily, about Thomas's life insurance. Is it enough to cover outstanding medical bills if the worst happens?" Emily's eyes snapped to mine, suddenly alert. "Life insurance?" I nodded, letting my voice quaver slightly. "I've been worried, you see, about the future, about what happens if Thomas doesn't recover. The house, the business. I know it all goes to you, of course, but I wondered if there might be something set aside for me." It was a performance designed to tell Emily exactly what she wanted to hear, that I was oblivious to her real plan, concerned only about my own financial future. Emily's expression softened into false sympathy. "Oh, Catherine, you don't need to worry about that. Thomas made sure everything will be taken care of." "I'm sure he did," I thought bitterly, "just not in the way you planned." "That's a relief," I said, forcing a grateful smile. "You know, at my age, security becomes so important. The thought of having to move from my little apartment, well, it frightens me." "I understand completely," Emily replied, her tone patronizing. "Rest assured, you'll be provided for." The lies came so easily to her. In that moment, looking at her perfect composure as she sat beside the husband she was actively trying to murder, I understood true evil in a way I never had before. As evening turned to night, I played my part, gradually allowing my head to droop, pretending to drift off to sleep in my chair. Through barely open eyes, I watched Emily check her phone repeatedly, her agitation growing with each passing hour. Sarah made a show of ending her shift at 11 p.m., introducing the night nurse, actually Detective Bennett's partner, Officer Lisa Chen, in a nurse's uniform. "Call if anything changes," Sarah said, loud enough for Emily to hear. "I'll be back in the morning." Once she had gone, Officer Chen busied herself at the far end of the room, pretending to update charts, while actually monitoring the situation. Around midnight, Emily stood up, stretching elaborately. "I'm going to get some coffee," she announced to no one in particular. "And maybe a sandwich from the cafeteria. Can I bring you anything?" she asked Officer Chen. "No, thank you," Chen replied without looking up. Emily glanced at me, still pretending to be asleep, and then slipped out of the room. The moment she was gone, Chen approached me. "She's making her move," she whispered. "Detective Bennett is tracking her. She just met someone in the parking garage, a man matching William Hayes's description. They exchanged something." My heart began to race. This was it. The trap was set, and Emily was walking right into it. Chen continued, "She'll be back soon. Remember, no matter what you see, don't intervene. We need to catch her in the act. The room is fully monitored, and backup is seconds away." I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. Chen returned to her position, and I resumed my sleeping pose. 10 minutes later, Emily returned. Through my lashes, I watched her scan the room, confirming that Thomas was still asleep, and I was still out cold in my chair. Officer Chen had moved to the hallway, visible through the door window, but seemingly focused on paperwork. Emily quietly locked the bathroom door from the inside, then closed it. A diversion, I realized. If anyone came in suddenly, they'd think she was in the bathroom. Then she approached Thomas's IV stand, reaching into her pocket to pull out a small vial and a syringe. This was it, the moment of truth. Every muscle in my body tensed with the effort not to jump up and stop her. As she uncapped the syringe and inserted it into the vial, drawing up a clear liquid, Thomas's eyes suddenly opened. He looked directly at her, fully alert. "What are you doing, Emily?" he asked clearly. Emily froze, syringe in hand, shock written across her perfect features. "Thomas, you're awake. I was just..." "The nurse asked me to inject something into my IV?" Thomas asked, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "What is it, Emily? Or should I call you Vanessa?" The blood drained from her face. "What did you say?" Thomas's eyes flicked to me, and I abandoned my pretense of sleep, sitting upright in my chair. "It's over, Emily," I said quietly. "We know everything." For a moment, she looked like a cornered animal, dangerous and desperate. Then, with shocking speed, she lunged toward Thomas with the syringe. But Thomas was ready. He rolled away from her, yanking his IV pole with him, while I slammed my hand on the emergency call button. The door burst open. Detective Bennett and 2 officers rushed in, while Officer Chen blocked the other exit. "Drop the syringe and put your hands up," Bennett commanded, her weapon drawn. Emily stood frozen, the syringe still clutched in her hand, her perfect mask finally cracking completely. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "He deserves this. They all deserved it." "Put it down, Emily," Thomas said, his voice sad but firm. "It's done." For a terrifying moment, I thought she might lunge at him again, might try to plunge that needle into him in one final act of violence. But then her shoulders slumped, and the syringe clattered to the floor. As the officers moved in to handcuff her, Emily's eyes found mine. The hatred in them was palpable. "You," she hissed. "The interfering old woman. You did this." I met her gaze steadily. "No, Emily, you did this. All of it. From the first husband to the last drop of poison, this was all your doing." As they led her away, I rushed to Thomas's side, gathering my son in my arms for the first time since he was a teenager. He clung to me like a child, his strong frame shaking with silent sobs. "She tried to kill me," he whispered against my shoulder. "She actually tried to kill me." "But she failed," I reminded him, stroking his hair. "She failed because you're stronger than she thought. We both are, Doctor." Wilson and Sarah rushed in, immediately checking Thomas's condition and the displaced IV. "Is he all right?" I asked anxiously. Dr. Wilson nodded, relief evident on his tired face. "He's stable, and with the poison stopped completely now, he should make a full recovery." Thomas looked up at me, his eyes red but clear. "How did you know, Mom? How did you figure it out?" I glanced at Sarah, who smiled modestly. "I had help, a lot of help from people who saw through Emily's perfect facade." Detective Bennett returned, holding up the syringe in an evidence bag. "We got her. The syringe contains a lethal dose of potassium chloride. Would have stopped his heart instantly and been virtually untraceable if we hadn't caught her in the act." She looked at Thomas with professional compassion. "Mr. Rogers, I know this is a terrible shock, but we'll need your statement when you're feeling up to it." Thomas straightened his shoulders, a flash of his old determination showing through his weakened state. "I'm feeling up to it now, Detective. That woman nearly killed me and would have stolen everything I've worked for. I want her locked away forever." As Bennett recorded his statement, I sat beside him, holding his hand, my mind still trying to process everything that had happened. We had survived. We had stopped a predator, but the road to recovery, both physical and emotional, would be long. Yet looking at my son, seeing the strength returning to his eyes with each passing hour, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Pure, powerful hope for the future. Emily, or Vanessa, whatever her real name was, had underestimated us both. She had seen an old woman and a trusting man, easy prey for her schemes. She never understood the strength that lies in a mother's love, or the resilience of the human spirit. That was her final, fatal mistake. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hospital rooms, police stations, and lawyers' offices. Thomas grew stronger each day, his body slowly healing from months of systematic poisoning. The dark circles under his eyes faded, color returned to his cheeks, and most importantly, clarity came back to his mind. As the warfarin cleared his system, he remembered more and more about the subtle warning signs he'd noticed but dismissed. Emily's secretiveness about finances, her insistence on preparing his food and drinks herself, her gradual isolation of him from friends and family, especially from me. "I should have seen it," he said one afternoon as we shared lunch in his hospital room. He was sitting up now, eating solid food, looking more like my son again. There were so many red flags. I reached across the small table to squeeze his hand. Predators like Emily, Vanessa, are experts at manipulation. They know exactly how to make you doubt yourself. Thomas shook his head, anger and shame battling in his expression. "She made me believe Mom was the problem, that you were clingy, interfering, that I needed to cut the apron strings. God, I was such a fool." "You were in love," I said simply. "Love makes us vulnerable." His eyes, so like his father's, met mine. "She almost took everything. The house you bought for me, the business, my life." His voice broke on the last word. "And she would have gotten away with it if not for you and Sarah." I thought of Sarah Johnson, the vigilant nurse whose instincts and courage had started this whole chain of events. She visited Thomas daily, checking his progress, becoming something more than a caregiver, a friend. Sarah recognized her, I explained. From another hospital, another victim. If she hadn't been transferred here, if she hadn't been assigned to your case. The thought was too terrible to finish. Sometimes fate turns on such small hinges. Detective Bennett visited that afternoon, bringing updates on the case against Emily, or Vanessa as we now knew her to be. "The evidence is overwhelming," she reported, setting a thick folder on the bedside table. "The poisoned orange juice, the potassium chloride syringe, the recorded conversations about accelerating your death, the financial documents showing her attempts to transfer your assets." Thomas leaned forward. "And the previous husbands? The other victims?" Bennett's expression turned grim. "We're exhuming bodies, reviewing medical records. It's slow work, but we're building cases for at least 3 previous murders spanning 6 years. I shuddered, thinking of those other families, those other mothers who had lost their sons to this monster, who hadn't been as fortunate as I was to stop it in time. "What about William Hayes?" I asked, remembering the lawyer who had been Vanessa's accomplice. "Singing like a canary," Bennett replied with grim satisfaction. Once we showed him the evidence, he turned on Vanessa immediately, offering testimony in exchange for a lighter sentence. Thomas snorted derisively. "Honor among thieves. In this case, it works in our favor," Bennett pointed out. "Hayes has knowledge of her previous identities, her methods, even details about the other victims that will strengthen our case." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "But I should warn you both, this won't be easy. The trial will be public, messy. The media is already circling. Black Widow is what they're calling her. You'll both be under scrutiny." Thomas straightened his shoulders, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. It was what his father used to do when facing a challenge. "Let them scrutinize," he said firmly. "I have nothing to hide. And if my story helps prevent another family from going through this nightmare, it's worth any discomfort." Pride surged through me. This was my son, resilient, principled, brave. The traits had always been there, just temporarily buried under Vanessa's manipulation. "What about the house?" I asked. "And the business?" Bennett nodded. "The judge has frozen all assets pending trial, but given the evidence, it's almost certain they'll remain in Thomas's name. Hayes admitted to falsifying transfer documents, which makes any attempted property shift null and void. Small victories, but important ones. The material possessions could be replaced. Thomas's life could not." After Bennett left, Thomas turned to me, his expression troubled. "Mom, I want you to move in with me once I'm discharged, at least temporarily." The offer took me by surprise. "Into the house?" He nodded. "It's too big for just me anyway. And frankly, I don't think I should be alone yet." A shadow crossed his face. "The nightmares are intense." I understood completely. My own sleep had been fractured with images of Vanessa standing over Thomas's hospital bed, syringe in hand, that cold smile on her perfect face. "Of course I'll stay with you," I assured him. "As long as you need." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "And about the money you loaned me for the business." I waved a hand dismissively. "That's not important right now." "It is to me," Thomas insisted. "You gave me everything, Mom. Your savings, your security. And I let her come between us." His voice caught. "I want to make it right." Before I could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but it's time for physical therapy." Thomas groaned theatrically. "Already? I just started feeling my legs again after yesterday's torture session." Sarah grinned. "No pain, no gain, Mr. Rogers. Doctor's orders." As she helped Thomas into the wheelchair, I noticed the way her eyes lingered on his face, the gentle care in her touch. And I noticed the way Thomas smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Something was blossoming there, tentative and new. It gave me hope that from this terrible ordeal, something good might grow. Life has a way of surprising us like that. 2 days later, Dr. Wilson delivered the news we'd been waiting for. Thomas could go home. His liver function had returned to nearly normal levels, the warfarin was completely out of his system, and with continued outpatient treatment, he could expect a full recovery. "You're a lucky man, Mr. Rogers," Dr. Wilson said, reviewing the final test results. "Another week of poisoning at the increased dosage, and we might be having a very different conversation." Thomas nodded soberly. "I know, and I'm grateful. To you, to Sarah, to the entire team." He glanced at me, especially to my mother, who never gave up on me even when I pushed her away. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back. There had been enough crying. Now was the time for healing, for rebuilding. The house felt different when we returned, emptier, cleaner somehow, as if Vanessa's presence had been a dark stain that was finally lifted. Police had searched it thoroughly, removing her belongings as evidence, leaving behind only the barest traces of her existence. Still, Thomas hesitated on the threshold, his face pale. "I don't know if I can sleep in that bedroom," he confessed, knowing she lay beside me, planning my death night after night. "Then we'll change rooms," I said practically. "Move your things to the guest suite, redecorate, make it new." He looked at me gratefully. "You always did know how to fix things, Mom." "Not always," I admitted, thinking of how powerless I'd felt as Vanessa had systematically isolated my son. "But I'm learning." That first night back home was difficult. Thomas paced restlessly, jumping at every creak and groan of the house settling. I made tea, found old photo albums, anything to distract him from the memories haunting every corner. Around midnight, exhaustion finally won. He fell asleep on the living room sofa, and I covered him with a blanket, watching the rise and fall of his chest, a sight I would never again take for granted. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Thomas worked remotely, rebuilding his business relationships that had suffered during his illness. I managed the household, cooking meals that would help restore his strength, fielding phone calls from concerned friends and nosy reporters. Sarah visited often, initially to check on Thomas's recovery, but soon the pretense fell away. They would talk for hours on the patio, their voices drifting through open windows, sometimes serious, sometimes punctuated by laughter. It was during this period that we received word. Vanessa Mitchell had been formally charged with attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The trial date was set for 3 months away. "They're still building cases for the previous murders," Detective Bennett explained during one of her visits. "But the prosecutor is confident we have more than enough for a conviction on the charges related to Thomas." Thomas nodded, his jaw set. "I want to testify. I want to look her in the eye and tell the world what she did." "You'll get that chance," Bennett assured him. "Your testimony will be crucial." As the trial approached, media interest intensified. "The Black Widow's Web," screamed one headline. "Serial killer bride nearly claims 4th victim," declared another. Reporters camped at the end of our driveway, hoping for a statement, a photo, any scrap they could use to feed the public's insatiable appetite for true crime. Thomas handled it with remarkable grace. He gave one carefully worded interview to a respected journalist, declined all others, and focused on healing, both physically and emotionally. "I don't want to be defined by this," he told me one evening as we watched the local news cover Vanessa's case for the 5th night in a row. "I'm more than just her victim." "Of course you are," I agreed, muting the television. "This will pass," The media will find a new story, but in the meantime, your testimony could save lives." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's what keeps me going. The thought that speaking out might prevent another family from experiencing this nightmare." 2 weeks before the trial, William Hayes changed his plea to guilty in exchange for his testimony against Vanessa. It was a significant victory for the prosecution, but it meant Thomas would still need to take the stand. Sarah came over the night we received the news, bringing dinner and moral support. As we sat around the kitchen table, she reached for Thomas's hand. "I'll be there," she promised. "Every day of the trial. Whenever you look at the gallery, you'll see a friendly face." I would be there too, of course, but I understood what Sarah was offering. Something different, something new, a future beyond this trauma. The night before the trial, neither Thomas nor I could sleep. We sat in the kitchen drinking decaf coffee, anxiety like a physical presence between us. What if she gets off? Thomas voiced the fear we'd both been harboring. What if the jury doesn't believe us? I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "The evidence is overwhelming, honey. Detective Bennett and the prosecutor have built a solid case." He nodded, but doubt still shadowed his eyes. "I keep dreaming about her. In the dreams, she's standing over me with that syringe, but this time no one comes. No one stops her." My heart ached for my son, for the innocence he had lost, for the trust that had been so brutally betrayed. "She can't hurt you anymore," I said firmly. "Tomorrow you'll face her as a survivor, not a victim. You'll tell your truth, and then we'll start building a life without her shadow hanging over us." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and curious onlookers when we arrived the next morning. Sarah met us at the entrance, as promised, her presence steady and reassuring. Detective Bennett ushered us through a side door, away from the cameras, and shouted questions. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate somehow. And then she was there, Vanessa Mitchell, seated beside her defense attorney, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, her designer clothes replaced by a modest navy suit. Our eyes met across the room, and the hatred in her gaze was palpable. But instead of fear, I felt only pity. What empty hole existed in this woman's soul that she could systematically destroy lives for money? What damage had created such a monster? The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor, Michael Simmons, laid out the case methodically. The poisoned orange juice, the falsified documents, the recorded conversations planning Thomas's death, the pattern of similar deaths in Vanessa's wake. Her defense attorney, a slick man named Robert Stone, countered with claims of circumstantial evidence, suggestions that Thomas had self-administered warfarin due to depression, implications that I had orchestrated the whole thing out of jealousy toward my daughter-in-law. It was ridiculous, desperate, and yet I found myself holding my breath as jurors' expressions remained neutral, unreadable. The prosecution called its first witness, Sarah Johnson. Sarah took the stand with quiet confidence, describing how she had recognized Vanessa from her previous hospital, how her suspicions had been aroused by Thomas's symptoms and Emily's behavior. "In my 15 years as a nurse, I've never seen a loving spouse who insisted on personally administering every drop of liquid their partner consumed, who disposed of containers immediately, who became agitated when hospital staff suggested dietary restrictions," she testified. Stone tried to paint her as an obsessive busybody during cross-examination. "So you took it upon yourself to spy on Mrs. Rogers based on a vague resemblance to someone from another hospital? To hide her mother-in-law and record private conversations?" Sarah remained unflappable. "I took action based on recognized patterns of suspicious behavior and symptoms consistent with poisoning. As a medical professional, I have a duty to protect patients from harm." Dr. Wilson followed, providing clinical evidence of warfarin poisoning, explaining the progressive nature of Thomas's symptoms, the laboratory confirmation of tampered orange juice, the slow recovery once the poisoning stopped. Then it was my turn. As I took the stand, my hands trembled slightly. Vanessa watched me with those cold green eyes, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She still thought me weak. An old woman, easily dismissed. She had no idea. "Mrs. Rogers," Prosecutor Simmons began, "please tell the court in your own words what you witnessed at St. Mary's Hospital on October 3rd. I took a deep breath and began my testimony. The frantic rush to the hospital, Sarah's intervention, the overheard conversation between Vanessa and William Hayes. My voice grew stronger as I spoke, the details crystal clear in my memory. She called me the old woman, I recalled. Said I had no power, no influence, and that after Thomas was gone, she'd never have to see my wrinkled face again. Simmons guided me through the events that followed, the discovery of the fake ID, the increased vigilance around Thomas, the final night when Vanessa attempted to inject potassium chloride into his IV. When it was Stone's turn for cross-examination, he approached with exaggerated courtesy. "Mrs. Rogers, isn't it true that you never approved of your son's marriage?" "I welcomed Emily Vanessa into our family," I corrected him. "I was grateful my son had found someone to love." "And yet you admit to hiding and eavesdropping on her private conversations, to working with hospital staff to intercept food and drinks she prepared for her husband?" "After overhearing her discuss murdering my son for his money, yes, I took action to protect him," I replied evenly. "Stone tried to rattle me with implications about my financial interest in Thomas's estate, suggestions that I had manipulated evidence, coached my son's testimony. But with each question, I remained calm, speaking truth to his distortions. By the time I stepped down, I felt drained but satisfied. I had done my part. I had told our story. The next day, Thomas took the stand. My heart swelled with pride as my son faced his would-be murderer with dignity and courage. He described the gradual onset of his illness, Vanessa's insistence on preparing his orange juice, her efforts to isolate him from friends and family. "I trusted her completely," he testified. "Even when I found strange documents, even when money went missing from our accounts, I made excuses for her. I wanted to believe in our marriage." His voice broke when he described waking in the hospital to find Vanessa preparing to inject something into his IV. In that moment, looking into her eyes, I knew the truth. The woman I had loved, had built a life with, was trying to kill me. Stone's cross-examination was brutal. He suggested Thomas had poisoned himself for insurance money, that he had marital problems and wanted out, that he had conspired with me to frame his wife. But Thomas remained steady, his answers clear and consistent. When asked why Vanessa would want to murder him, he replied simply, "For money, the house my mother bought for me, the business I built, my life insurance policy, together worth over $1 million. The prosecution's final witness was William Hayes, Vanessa's former accomplice and attorney. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided damning testimony about their conspiracy. "Vanessa Mitchell approached me 3 years ago, using the name Emily Watson at the time. She said she had a business proposition that could make us both wealthy. The plan was simple. She would marry a financially stable man, gradually poison him while transferring his assets, then collect his life insurance after his death." Hayes detailed their preparations for Thomas's death, the falsified documents, the planned asset transfers, the timeline they had established. When the hospital staff began interfering with her poisoning routine, she became desperate, he testified. "She contacted me about acquiring potassium chloride, a substance that would cause cardiac arrest but be difficult to detect without specific testing. Throughout his testimony, Vanessa sat motionless, her expression unreadable. Not once did she show remorse, concern, or even anxiety about her fate. The defense case was brief and unconvincing. They called a toxicologist who admitted under cross-examination that warfare and poisoning could indeed cause Thomas's symptoms. They presented character witnesses who knew Emily Rogers only superficially through charity events and social gatherings. Vanessa herself declined to testify, a decision that spoke volumes to the jury. In closing arguments, Stone tried one last desperate angle: reasonable doubt. The prosecution's case relies on circumstantial evidence, unreliable witnesses, and a vindictive mother-in-law, he argued. My client may have made mistakes, used poor judgment, even changed her identity, but that doesn't make her a killer. Prosecutor Simmons countered with a devastating summary of the evidence: the poisoned orange juice, the potassium chloride syringe, the recorded conversations, the financial documents, the pattern of previous deaths. Vanessa Mitchell is not just a wife who made mistakes, he concluded. She is a calculating predator who has left a trail of bodies and grieving families across 3 states. Thomas Rogers was meant to be her 4th victim. Thanks to the vigilance of a dedicated nurse, the courage of his mother, and his own will to survive, he is instead her last victim. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours, remarkably quick for such a complex case. When they filed back into the courtroom, their faces were solemn, resolved. On the charge of attempted murder in the 1st degree, we find the defendant guilty. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. Thomas gripped my hand so tightly it hurt, but I welcomed the pain. It meant we were here, alive, together. On the charges of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Vanessa showed no reaction as the verdict was read, her perfect mask firmly in place. Only when the judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later did a flicker of emotion cross her face. Not fear or remorse, but anger. Cold, calculating anger. As the bailiff led her away, she turned to look at Thomas and me one last time. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll find a way out. And when I do—" "You're just another criminal on her way to prison," Thomas interrupted, his voice calm and clear. "Nothing special, nothing memorable, nothing." It was the final blow, watching her ego crumble as the reality of her situation finally caught up with her. The mask slipped, revealing the hollow, damaged person beneath. Then she was gone, led through a side door to begin her journey to prison. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Thomas had decided to speak publicly, feeling that our story might help others recognize the warning signs of similar predators. "My name is Thomas Rogers," he began, facing the cameras with quiet dignity. "And I stand before you today because of 3 extraordinary people. Sarah Johnson, a nurse who trusted her instincts. Dr. Marcus Wilson, who took her concerns seriously. And my mother, Catherine Rogers, who never gave up on me even when I had pushed her away." He searched for me in the crowd and extended his hand. I stepped forward and took it, overwhelmed with emotion. "Mom," he said, his voice carrying through the microphones. "Forgive me for the lost years, for the ignored calls, for the forgotten birthdays, for making you feel like you weren't important. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "You already have," I replied, tears flowing freely now. "You survived. That's all I needed." 2 weeks later, Vanessa Mitchell was sentenced to 32 years in prison with no possibility of parole before serving at least 20 years. The investigations into her previous husband's deaths continued, with prosecutors in 2 other states preparing additional murder charges that would ensure she would never know freedom again. 3 months after the trial, Thomas and I sold the house. That place that I had bought with so much love now contained too many bitter memories. With the proceeds, Thomas purchased a smaller but sunnier home closer to my apartment, and with the remainder, we did something I had never imagined. We created a foundation. We called it Vigilant Hearts, dedicated to helping families who had been victims of fraud or predatory relationships. We provided free legal advice, psychological support, and financial guidance to those rebuilding their lives after betrayal. Sarah joined our team, using her medical knowledge to train healthcare workers to recognize signs of poisoning and abuse. Detective Bennett served as an advisor, helping connect victims with appropriate legal resources. In our first year, we helped 23 families, 23 stories that might have ended in tragedy but found help in time. As for Thomas and Sarah, their friendship gradually blossomed into something deeper. I watched with joy as my son learned to trust again, to open his heart despite the scars Vanessa had left. They took things slowly, both aware of the shadows still lingering from the past. "She's different from anyone I've ever known," Thomas confided one evening as we prepared dinner. "Honest, straightforward. What you see is exactly what you get. The opposite of Vanessa in every way that mattered. I found my own renewal as well. I moved into a beautiful one-bedroom condo that Thomas insisted on purchasing for me. Not a loan, Mom, a gift, long overdue. I began volunteering at the local elementary school, using my teaching experience to mentor struggling readers. I joined a book club, made new friends, started living for myself after decades of putting everyone else first. Thomas comes over for dinner every Sunday. We cook together, laugh together, plan the future together. We've made up for lost time not by dwelling in the past, but by building something new and meaningful. And when I look back at that terrible night in the hospital, at that moment when I heard murder plans whispered in a sterile hallway, I no longer feel just pain and fear. I feel gratitude, because that night I discovered something about myself that I didn't know existed. I discovered that I am stronger than I thought, braver than I imagined, more powerful than anyone, including myself, had ever believed. I am Catherine Rogers. I am 66 years old. And finally, after a lifetime of giving, I learned how to fight. And I won. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar where you had to find strength you didn't know you had? Comment below and share your story. And if you found inspiration in Catherine's journey, please consider watching these 2 other stories that are channel favorites. The Will My Daughter Tried to Hide, and When My Son's Wife Banned Me from Their Home.